Okay, let's talk about a must-own lens that's so wonderful that your nuggets will fall right off and roll right into the gutter. I know you're thinking, oh my god, how many must-own lenses are there? Well, if you actually count back over these hundreds of videos, there really aren't that many. There are a lot of lens reviews, but there are not that many must-own lenses. And I certainly don't want anybody to get the impression that since I say something's a must-own, I mean, you know, this is photography. Whether you got a lot of money or you don't, I mean, I don't know if it's a hobby for you or if you take it really seriously or you're able to divest certain funds towards it, but I'm not one to, gets a brain bug in someone's head thinking they need to waste, well, in this case, it's certainly not wasting money. If it's a must-own lens for me, it's never wasted because it's a good lens, but is it something that you must have, or is it something that you actually need? So I don't want anybody to get that impression. So anyway, now Nikon currently makes 3 lenses in this focal length, and this is not a Nikkor lens. So let's take a look at it. You can probably deduce what it was from my last must-own lens, which is right here, the 40mm Voigtlander f2, and here it is. Ta-da! Let's talk about it a little bit. This is the Voigtlander 28mm f2.8. It's a color scope R. So, what's phenomenal about this lens? Well, currently Nikon has 3 28mm. That's the 28mm 1.8G, the 28mm D series, and the 28mm 2.8 AIS. All of those are still current production lenses. Now the G is about the same size as the 20mm f1.8. It's rather large, plasticky lens, and it has good corner-to-corner sharpness. They've all got vignetting. When it comes to wide lenses, they've all got vignetting. This one has vignetting up to f5.6. It's a perfect lens for full frame or a DX use. It is a full frame lens. Now this lens is another $30 more expensive than the 40mm. Now you would think it looks a little larger because it's not sitting on the camera, but it's actually about 3mm, not exactly, but 3mm shorter than the 40mm Voigtlander. So what's special about this lens? What makes it a must-have lens? Now I have to say right from the get-go that 28mm was never really my awesome cup of tea focal length. But of course it depends on what you shoot. I love everything in 20mm if it's good, and everything in 35mm. That's being subjective. I have to be objective. A lot of you folks ask me about what's an awesome 28mm lens, and this is it. And let's talk about it first relative to the Nikkor. Right after this I'm going to do a close-up video so you can take a close look at the lens. Compared to the 3 current production Nikkor 28mm, which is the 28mm 1.8G, 28mm D autofocus, and the 28mm 2.8 AIS manual focus lens, all 3 of those which currently exist. Now let's first talk about sharpness, and then talk about depth and color rendition. Okay, now this lens has 7 elements and 6 groups, so I have something to report on this Voigtlander 28mm, and that's its sharpness. The sharpness on this lens is an issue, and by issue I mean it's a good thing, because compared to everything else Nikon currently has out there, it blows the crap. It blows the dog piss out of all of them in sharpness. It is just, it's not sharp at all. It's just insanely sharp. It is not, sits at a level of 7, 8, 9, or 10. It rests right at the rim of 10 and verging on 11. So it's incredibly sharp. One of the most amazing things about this lens, other than it being smoother than the wax crotch of a Swedish supermodel to focus, just a pure dream. It's just like focusing, sticking your fingers in hot butter and focusing. One of the wonderful things, you can see some of the test shots below, I'll give you a link to, is that the color saturation and the rendition. Now the rear element's aspherical. The color saturation and the depth and rendition on this lens are absolutely stunning. the expensive Nikkor 28mm f1.8G lens, it blows the piss out of it. Now, does a 28, like I've told you before, that there's no perfect lens that has perfect attributes down the scale. It is an absolute optical impossibility. You build things either for perfect corner sharpness, and what you end up doing is you introduce so much glass and so much ED glass that you totally change the color saturation rendition of the lens. So a lens is either weighted toward one end of the spectrum or the other, or it's weighted right in the middle, but it's never a perfect lens across the spectrum. This lens, however, despite the fact that it has a little bit of vignetting at f2.8, and the fact that it has a little bit of vignetting at f4, no big deal. All wide lenses have vignetting, including the 28mm f1.8. Has a little bit more than it, but this color saturation and the depth and the rendition of what this lens produces is nothing short of absolutely ball-dropping phenomenal. It's incredible. This lens isn't the cat's ass, as I've jokingly said before. Now I say it jokingly, but I also mean it seriously. This lens doesn't qualify as the cat's ass. This lens is the tits. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the 28mm as a focal length, just as a focal length, I do greatly enjoy this lens because it is just flat out bloody effing awesome. It's just, now it is expensive, it's not that cheap, but it's also smaller than the 40mm, not by much. I mean, who cares about 3mm, right? Although oddly enough, Voigtlander says it's the exact same width. It's not. They must have changed the specs, because you can even see it and you can whip out the digital calipers, and it is a hair shorter than the 40mm. When it's focused at infinity. This one looks a little bit thicker because I have a filter on it right now. Normally this would not be here, so I have a really good anti-reflective 52mm filter on it, where the front element, the front screw-in threads are 52mm. The only downside, like every other Voigtlander, is it, especially on a thin pancake lens, that it comes with this obnoxiously thick lens cap. But who gives a damn? That has nothing to do with how good of a picture it takes. So it ultimately doesn't matter to anything, but I find it hilarious that Voigtlander makes this incredibly owned by Cassina, and Cassina is basically Zeiss, so you're talking about Zeiss, Cassina, Voigtlander. They make this incredibly thin lens, and what they include with is a lens cap almost as thick as half the width of the lens, which is really kind of funny, but that's irrelevant. I want you to see the test samples from this 28mm, because a lot of you people asked me about 28mm. I'm glad I was finally able to make this video, because this is the lens. I love pancake lenses, and I'll actually be doing a video about the optics of what... there's several things that actually change the binocular disparity and the parallax of the image rendered, not just in corner sharpness. There are a lot of lens attributes which include depth rendition, color saturation. You know, a lot of you people, you're totally hung up on the BS of sharpness. Sharpness is important, of course. You're hung up on sharpness and corner, and you're hung up on chromatic aberration, and those are all good things. But you've forgotten about the really good stuff that make a prime lens a prime lens, and this sits above a regular prime lens, because this lens blows the balls right off of the other 328mm Nikkors that Nikon produces. And even on top of it blowing the crap out of everything Nikon currently produces as far as depth, color rendition, and sharpness. And my God, this lens is just effing sharp. I mean, it's just, I said, your nuggets will fall off, roll into the gutter. Not only is it incredibly sharp, but Nikon has never produced anything of this exquisitely high quality. They just haven't. Like I said, unfortunately, the lens is $479, but is it comparable to $10,000 plus Leica lenses that I used to play with back at Beach Photo? Yeah, it's actually better than some of them. So ultimately, this lens, considering what it is, the quality, and the absolute insane level to precision and attention to detail and production, and the incredibly high quality control of this lens, it's actually, the actuality of it is that it's a damn cheap. Here's something else. Now, I'm not a bokeh slut by any means, but there are a lot of bokeh sluts out there. I don't know if you know this or not, but towards the, as you go from 50mm towards 20mm, getting good bokeh basically becomes impossible. This lens has a 9-bladed aperture, and by the way, the aperture on this thing has the smoothest, most beautiful, exquisite precision. I've actually looked at it under 15 magnification loupe, as well as the other Voigtlanders. The bokeh on this 28 millimeters, which is basically unheard of at 28 millimeter focal length, is incredible. Okay, and at 28 millimeters, that's just bloody stinking unheard of. So, if you wanted a wide lens with awesome bokeh, none of the other Nikon lenses, despite the fact that their color rendition and their depth and their saturation and their sharpness don't even match this lens, none of them have good bokeh. This one actually does. It's a 9-bladed aperture. The color saturation combined with the depth rendition are absolutely off the scale. That combined with the insane, I mean, I can't even begin to describe to you. That's not to say the 40 isn't sharp, which it damn well is. But I can't, at 28 millimeters, even the very really expensive like 20 millimeter f1.8 that Nikon produces, as you get towards the wide end of the spectrum, as the distortion creeps in due to it capturing a wider field of view, getting a really sharp lens becomes increasingly difficult. This lens is just, it actually reaches a level that I would call unbelievably sharp for a 28 millimeter. It's literally unbelievable. And so, of those of you that have asked the question, I've been waiting to unveil this lens, so I've finally done it here. And I actually can call this a must-own lens. Yeah, it's very expensive. I mean, but it's not. If you actually weigh the factors of what this lens is, and I know you don't have it in your hands, but compared to like a $10,000 Leica made in the early 1980s when they were at the peak of their production quality, when they were actually producing lenses that were like little mini Rolls Royces, this lens is insanely cheap. Insanely cheap. The multi-coating on the elements is kind of hard to describe. I actually have to get into like a 15-minute discussion on high quality multi-coating. But the anti-reflective vacuum deposited crystalline coating of the anti-reflective coating on these elements of the Cassina Voigtlanders is absolutely off the scale. It's incredible. It also means that cleaning them with distilled water is hard because the coating is so thick that instead of my recommendation on the other lenses, you have to clean these like Leica lenses, which means that when you get a dirty spot or a spit spot or something like that on that, you don't clean them with distilled water and Q-tips like you do every other Nikkor lens. You got to whip out the 70% isopropyl alcohol and 30% water. You know, it's typical rubbing alcohol, not witch hazel, but rubbing alcohol, because the AI coating on them is so exquisite. And that is actually what cleans the front and rear element in case you have to clean one of these. You don't use distilled water. Just absolutely incredible. Let's take a look at the next video. And anyway, I've got a little case of pancake lenses. I've got this and the 20 millimeters. I got the 20, 28 millimeter, and the 40. I got a couple 40s. And 50 millimeter Nikkor pancakes. I've got a little case of pancakes I love to pack around because. And when you see the test samples of this lens, you'll probably be blown away. But if you're not blown away, then you really don't understand optics, because to get a lens that's this, you know, ball-droppingly sharp at 28 millimeters with incredible bokeh and really, really rich, deep, rich color saturation and depth rendition. Renditional distortion, I've talked about whether something has renditional distortion or does not. True depth rendition out of this lens is incredible. So this is a must-own lens. Although I do find the lens cap humorously obnoxious. That's no big deal. You can buy a screw-on metal lens cap for like $2, or a regular Nikon lens cap you can toss on there for like $1.50. I mean, who cares if it's made in China? I guess that's it. And check the links below for the test shots of this. And if you know lenses very much, like I said, I'm repeating myself, you'll be shocked at what can come out of the 28 millimeter like this. And as I've said, the three current production Nikkor lenses